everyone, and welcome to another live webinar from Seraphim. Thank you for joining us today. Today we'll be on a discussion about space data for insurance and how it's changing the InsurTech game. Insurance is one of the most specialist downstream applications that space-based Earth observation and remote sensor data is useful for. As extreme climate events become more frequent and more severe, insurance providers are finding it difficult to stay on top of the progressively volatile risk. Natural disasters such as wildfires, floods are perhaps more common, as well as climate risk, and can cause some of the biggest damages to individuals and businesses. So it's a huge problem. I'm joined today by Seraphim Space investment analyst Trisha.
Hi, Leah. Hi, everyone.
Thank you for joining me today. And I'm also joined by Mwenda, who's head of technology at Amini, a space currently leading the development of a purpose-built superpowered data infrastructure for Africa. But I'll let him explain a little bit more about that. Hi, Mwenda.
Hi, Leah. Thank you for having me today.
Great. I'll go to you first, Mwenda. Can you tell everyone a little bit about Amini and what's their mission?
Okay, good. Thank you, Leah. So one of the biggest challenges that we find in Africa is a lack of is what we call a lack of trustable, verifiable, accurate data that businesses and organizations can use to make important decisions. So what we at Amini are doing are actually building what we call a purpose-built climate/environmental data infrastructure to fix this data gap by monitoring and collecting accurate, verifiable, trustable data at scale to drive systemic change and promote economic inclusivity. And we aim to do this, our aim by doing this is to be able to empower an ecosystem and basically open up economic visibility and foster opportunities for more than 1 billion lives. Yes, and one of the key things, maybe just to add on to that, one of the key things we're really focusing on right now is investing in space technology that is Africa focused. And the goal here is to be able to ensure that we're able to provide verifiable, trustable data from a space technology point of view that nobody else in the market is able to do. Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you for explaining that. Trisha, I'll go over to you. Can you explain to everyone a little bit more about the market size? What's the opportunity for space InsurTech at the moment?
Sure. So, I mean, InsurTech as a sector is huge on its own. You know, it's worth into the billions of dollars. But obviously InsurTech covers a lot of different things. What we're interested in from a space perspective is the types of insurance where space technology can make a difference. So one of the areas we identified for this is climate-related insurance and natural disasters. So what we're finding is that insurance incumbents are finding it very difficult to stay on top of this increasingly volatile risk, especially as climate change becomes more and more apparent. And there's a statistic that one of the insurance brokers, Aon, have quoted, which is that the global economic losses from natural disasters driven by climate change was over $300 billion last year. And less than half of that was insured. And that figure is almost double what it was only 4 years ago. So these figures are increasing quite rapidly. And what it means is that insurance providers are finding it difficult to predict these climate-related events and therefore actually price their policies appropriately. And this is obviously causing issues on the customer side because people are having to pay more and more for insurance where it's related to the climate. So, for example, homeowners insurance in the face of flooding. What we're also finding on the customer side actually is that insurance policyholders are having to wait sometimes years before they get their payouts after an event. And so we're seeing all of these trends within the broader insurance market. And I think it just points to this huge opportunity that there is for the market to be disrupted. And we're now seeing a very large number of startups addressing these trends.
Thanks, Trisha. We've already had some questions come in from the audience, so please keep them coming. I don't know if you want to pick a quick one up, Mwenda. Do you know anything about the current size of the insurance market in Africa at the moment?
Yes, thank you. I do not have the actual figure for it, but it's in the hundreds of billions. One of the things that we've actually seen based on our market analysis is that using the technology we have, we are very quickly able to open up the market, the insurance market by the billions of dollars, right? Yes, but unfortunately, I do not have the specific figure for that.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you for taking that one on the cuff. Trisha, A lot of people, you've explained it partly, but a lot of people don't really understand, the connection between space tech and space. Can you tell everyone a little bit more about the different ways these two can intersect and how big it can be?
Yes, definitely. And it's something that I was faced with myself when I first came across the concept that actually space tech could be useful to insurance and to insurtech. So insurance is actually, it's one of the more specialist downstream applications that space-based Earth observation and remote sensing data can be useful for. And what this data does, it improves the modeling and the prediction of these risks. So one example is using thermal data from space, so infrared thermal data to identify wildfire-prone areas, or using terrain measurements or imagery from space to map the likely extent of flooding. So that's one of the ways that space-derived data can help. Another way that satellite imagery can help is by speeding up the loss adjustment process that happens after an event. So it can provide real-time data to track the extent of damage, for example, after a flooding event. And it removes the need for, people having to go in person and survey the damage and then make an assessment of, what the loss was. And that makes it quicker for customers to get their payout. So essentially, the perspective of satellites orbiting high above the Earth means that this data can be accessed for a very large area and sort of help solve some of those challenges that are being faced in the insurance industry.
Thanks, Trisha. Mwenda, what types of insurance is SpaceTech most useful for Amini and why?
Okay, thank you. Yes, so based on our market analysis and the challenges that we found with people close to us, we know that insurance is one of the key things, key areas of we can use our technology to bring value. Now, when you're looking at the different insurance you can actually have from a satellite or a space point of view, all that comes to mind is property insurance, right? Basically, it's using high resolution imagery to assess proper conditions within each property is at, neighborhoods, infrastructure, and using that, come up with a proper claim request or a pricing or a payout process, right? The second type of insurance that's likely to be impacted by space is disaster insurance. So in this case, you're looking at things like floods, wildfires, hurricanes, tornadoes, etc. And they help. The reason as to why space technology becomes important within the disaster insurance ecosystem or purview, it's because it helps give a better understanding of the exposure and also help with ensuring quicker claims processing for who've been impacted, organizations that have been impacted. The other area is agriculture insurance. And we found that these to be one of the areas where there is an enormous impact, where enormous impact is possible. So what do I mean by that, right? So approximately 500 million farms, smallholder farms exist in the developing world, and these impacts either directly impact or help contribute to the livelihoods of up to 2.5 billion people, right? And the problem here is that if you try and use technology that has been built for the developed world, where the average land size holding is in the tens of hectares, 20, 30, 40, 60, etc. So we have big, large tracts of farms. We've got areas where, for example, one particular crop has been planted, so it's monocropped, right? Areas whereby the farms are mostly plateaued and everything. That type of technology doesn't work in Africa, where the average land holding is sub 0.11 hectare. Okay, and that same piece of land, we've got multiple crops, right? You've got animals in there, and the terrain is very, very divergent, right? So there is a need to have technology that is able to solve for this particular need. And that is what, again, we are building towards. So for example, I see a question where one of the audience members has asked why we are not using the freely available satellite imagery like the Copernicus. We're actually using that, right? But you'll find that, again, in the space of, in the purview of Africa, right, two things exist. Number one, it does not cover all parts of Africa. Once you're leaving the urban areas and countries in Africa, you start getting a lot of dark areas, right, where the image does not cover. And secondly, due to the nature of the size of the farms, right, 0.72 on average hectares on average, being able to measure very accurately what is happening on these pieces of land and use that to make decisions becomes quite a challenge, right? Especially when you're looking at the case of intercropping, different crops, different topographies, the temporal nature of the imagery, etc., etc.
Thank you. Fascinating. Trisha, over to you. Mwenda just described some of the complexities of the African terrain and the market, but what made Amini stand out to you from an investor perspective compared to other competitors?
Yeah, definitely. So I think what's exciting about Amini is that they're addressing this very huge market, but very underserved market. So there's a big gap in terms of what is available and what needs to be available. And, you know, from an investor's perspective, from a VC perspective, that's exactly the type of dynamic you're looking for. So take, you know, agriculture as the example that Mwenda brought up. You know, I think Africa is home to around 60% of the world's smallholder farmers. All of them are susceptible to climate change, and they need to better understand how to be resilient against it in the future. And there just isn't enough data to enable them to do that. So Amini's platform that aggregates all these various sources of data, whether it be, you know, satellites or ground-based sensors, that provides crucial insights to a huge variety of customers, not just agriculture, but you know, a broader range of businesses. I think what's also interesting is, you know, they're looking at collecting their own proprietary data in the future as well, which would be tailored exactly to target those gaps that existing satellite constellations can't address. So that, you know, that proprietary data is also an extremely valuable proposition from an investor's perspective. So yeah, that's some of the reasons why we're really excited to have Amini on board our accelerator.
Brilliant, thank you. Mwenda, are you allowed to go into that a little bit more in detail about your potential satellites, or what can you tell us?
Yeah, I can touch a bit on it, Leah, no worries. Yeah, so yes, Trisha is right. We are working on deploying our own constellation of nano satellites. And why are we doing this? The first is the fact that the currently available technology is not Africa focused, right? So you have gaps when you try and figure out how to get proper imagery for Africa on a consistent basis, right? The second case is the affordability of the technology, especially from a paid point of view, where you want to use better quality, high resolution data, right? And to give an example, it would cost approximately $164 billion to map out, if you decide every day, right, for a year, it would cost you $164 billion to actually do that, right? So obviously that process is not scalable. Now the third thing also is the way, the nature of our technology, the way we do our analysis. What you've built is a platform or a process that is able to do real-time analytics at scale. Okay, so in terms of using satellite imagery to figure out areas of interest, that has been done, right? And what happens right now in the market is that you're able to use any tool out there to figure out what's happening in a defined area of interest, right? But when you want to do that for 1 million farms, okay, at a go and get temporal data, maybe for the last 6 months, 20 years, what have you, it becomes very, very difficult, right? Using the technology, right, in terms of deploying the technology, in terms of running the analytics, in terms of the amount of people, the number of people you need to be able to run the analytics. So what we are doing with our technology of nanosats, in a very basic sense, is build a technology able to do at scale in real time. Okay, so essentially what we are saying here is being able to map out the whole of Africa consistently and being able to extract data from the image that is being captured with the satellites in orbit without having to send that data to the ground stations. And then instead of sending the images themselves, which are usually heavy, a couple of kilobytes of data, which are used for further downstream analytics. And I think that is one of the areas that a lot of satellite practitioners deploy their satellites as not focused on. And we think that by us being able to do it cost effectively, cover Africa and offer this data for businesses and organizations to use for their downstream activities.
Amazing, exciting times, lots to do in the future. Trisha, I'll go back to you. As time and technology moves on, we would expect the crossover between SpaceTech and InsurTech to become even more prominent, in Africa and globally. Can you tell us a little about any recent technological advances that have allowed this market to develop and grow?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say that really everything in insurance starts with the data. It starts with being able to understand the risks that you're underwriting. So the better data you have, the better business you can run. And what's crucial is, how up to date your information is, how affordable it is and how available it is. And so on these points, I think, especially on the satellite segment, there have been a lot of technical advances in recent years. So satellite constellations, all of these imaging platforms we have orbiting the Earth right now, including some of our portfolio companies actually at Seraphim. So one of the examples is ISI, which uses a type of imagery called synthetic aperture radar, and they provide accurate data on flooding damage with resolution down to 25 centimeters. And that really increases the amount of data you can actually use to understand the extent of that damage. Another one of our portfolio companies, Spire, they're working with a startup called Aurora Tech to collect, to launch satellites to collect real-time data about wildfires. And I think we're all aware, given the heat wave going on right now in Europe and, historically in the US and Australia as well, having that data about wildfires is crucial to be able to understand where they're going to go and what the risk of damage to property and land is. A couple of other companies I'll quickly mention. Pixel is one of our portfolio companies. They're based in India, and they're developing a novel sensor that can collect hyperspectral data from space. So it's going to image the Earth in multiple spectral bands and understand at a much deeper level the chemical composition of the Earth and our atmosphere. So that's another example of a very highly technical sort of development that's only been possible in recent years in order to get that level of accurate data. And what I just finish off with is, the data isn't everything. It's how you actually analyze it to understand what's happening. And an example of that is one of our portfolio companies, Planet Watchers, that does just that. They provide crop damage analytics to the US crop insurance market, which is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And they've developed these proprietary capabilities to better analyze the data. And so these are just some examples of the sort of technical advances that we'd expect to continue in this space and make that relationship between space tech and insurtech even more prominent going forwards.
Amazing, thank you. I think what's been really interesting about this conversation is that it's a global problem, and each different geography and country has its own different challenges, and I think it's kind of addressing them all, but in different ways. So thank you both for explaining that. I think that's all from me, but we've got a lot of questions coming in, a lot of really long questions. So I don't know if there's any, Mwenda, you really want to pick out an outline to people. Let me have a look through. But so thank you for everyone sending them in. Trying to read them.
I think there's a quick question that I can pick up about.
Yeah, fabulous.
On the data analytics side. So again, just building on what I just mentioned, space companies do produce a lot of data, but maximizing it and using it in a way that's appropriate is sometimes a limitation. And that's why, it is not just about having that data, it's about being able to analyze it and understand it in the correct context. And so, what Amini have right now, for example, is, I would say, more on the downstream side. They have the data and they have the know-how to analyze and understand it. But really, both of those have to go hand in hand. The better the data, the better the analytics. So, Mwenda, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think Trisha has covered it perfectly, right? And for us, the goal is to be able to, we are building this end-to-end stream, right? Being able to collect the best data possible, fusing data from multiple sources, multiple satellite imagery providers, maybe Landsat, Sentinel, private providers, players, being able to analyze based on the spatial resolution that the client requires, right? It could be farm level, it could be sovereign level, which means country level, it could be different geographical boundaries level, and being able to offer that data to our customers in a way that makes the most sense to them. Now, when you look at the insurance sector, for example, which is the topic for today, you realize that insurance companies don't necessarily care about the actual imagery, the raster imagery, right? Rather, they care about the data that has been extracted from that imagery, Okay, so the goal here is not to be able to, is the question here is not, rather is not the fact that you can use a tool to capture an image for an area at a time. The real question here, or the real answer here, is the fact that you're able to actually extract this data from this image at scale for multiple areas at once, right? And not just for one timestamp, rather for a long timestamp, for example, 6 months, 4 months, depending on the seasons of a particular crop calendar. And I think that is what one of the key differentiators for us as Amini in terms of our technology. And actually, it's one of the things that we are patenting IP protection processes. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, I think we may leave it there unless anyone has anything else to say or add quickly. But if anyone wants, this is always recorded and will be shared on our LinkedIn and hopefully on Amini's LinkedIn. And if anyone wants to ask any questions post live, we are happy to go on and answer those questions for you within LinkedIn. So hope you enjoyed today's conversation. So thank you for everyone who listened. Thank you for joining me as well.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.